Some of today's biggest political stories, we bring on our power panel. Joining me now is Alicia Menendez, Senior Advisor to the New Policy Institute, MSNBC political analyst Karen Finney, and finally Josh Trevino, Vice President of Communications at Texas Public Policy Foundation think tank. First question. Is the GOP savior Rick Perry haunted by an inconvenient truth? A recent New York Times article highlights Perry days as a Democrat in Texas, in the Texas Assembly at that, when he endorsed massive tax hikes. But it gets better. Let's not forget that Perry was the state campaign chairman for Al Gore during his 1988 presidential run. Josh, is the former Gore-loving Democrat really the guy to save the Republican Party?
Yes, Al, once upon a time there was this mythical creature called a conservative Democrat that used to walk the land. Rick Perry was one of them. Many other people were conservative Democrats back in the day. As the Democrats went through the great sort in American politics, and the liberals went left to the Democratic Party, and the conservatives went right to the Republican Party, Rick Perry was actually on the leading edge of that wave. You know, his Democrat past, where he was a conservative throughout, isn't going to hurt him in Republican eyes. It's the same career arc that Ronald Reagan had. It's the same career arc that a lot of good conservative Republicans have, including guys like Phil Gramm here in Texas. So frankly, it's only going to help him, because we Republicans, we love converts and we love people who've been conservatives their whole career, and Rick Perry has.
Karen, I'm a little confused. Reagan was a Democrat in California, which was a lot different than being a Democrat in Texas. And 88 going into 92, there was a little thing called triangulation. I don't think the Democrats went left. I think the Democrats went center. So tell me where Josh's rewrite of history, I mean, Josh, what is he talking about? They went to the right, the Democrats.
Well, you know, Texas has got, there's a bunch of stories of a bunch of different people, like Democrats who became Republicans and Republicans who became Democrats. I mean, you know, a couple of people who actually worked for George Bush the second. We had at one point or another been Democrats, then Republicans, Republicans, and Democrats. But I agree that I don't think it's going to hurt him, and there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I think he has more than maybe he's overcompensating. You know, guys sometimes do that. For the fact that he used to be a Democrat. I mean, he's very clearly conservative now. But remember, Michelle Bachmann also was a Democrat once. And so, you know, and most of the common theory is that if Perry gets into the race, that he's going to be the biggest challenge to her. Well, that's going to be something the two of them can duke out between each other.
Alicia, what do you think? Do you think that this will be something people would say that he may move in certain ways where the political wind is or where the opportunity lies? Or you think it's no big deal, others have done it, why not him?
No, Reverend, for sure, and I think he's actually a prime case of someone who's such an astute politician that his views really do change with the political wind. I mean, you look back even 10 years ago when he'd first become the governor of Texas, he was passing what were really moderate pieces of legislation, a hate crimes bill that protected members of the LGBT community. He endorsed and supported a lot of people who were more moderate, appointed them to positions in his administration. So he has a record of being more moderate, and we've seen him over time become more and more conservative. I think what we have to watch is what happens when he enters this primary, where we know that most of these candidates are lassoed further to the right. The question is not who is he today, but who is he going to be in a year's time?
Next question. Scared like a fox, Rupert Murdoch is purging some of the top executives in his global media empire. This morning, the head of the British side of the empire, Rebecca Brooks, resigned. This afternoon, Wall Street Journal head honcho Les Hinton resigned as well. And Attorney General Eric Holder announced today that the Justice Department is investigating News Corp 2. Karen, what does this mean for Murdoch's empire here in the U.S., including Fox News?
Well, I have to be honest, Reverend, I'm enjoying this story very much, although I am very sorry for the revelations that we heard in terms of the phone hacking and the pain that that's caused people. I think what it means is that where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, it's pretty odd the way they move so quickly to shut down News of the World. Then they move very quickly to, you know, they're clearly trying to stop the bleeding. But unfortunately, I think with each of these actions, it becomes increasingly clear that there's probably probably more in there. And ultimately, reports have indicated what they're really trying to do is seal off as much of this as possible from Rupert Murdoch's son. It was part of why they moved him from the UK to the United States, since he's the heir apparent. Sounds like, though, we're probably going to find out a lot more before this is over with.
Josh?
You know, I think what's interesting at this point is that all of the wrongdoing, the demonstrable wrongdoing right now, is on the British side of the pond. And so when you had Les Hinton today, who resigned as head of the Dow Jones Company, which contains the Wall Street Journal, he was resigning because he was actually on the British side when a lot of the wrongdoing there happened. It doesn't surprise me that the Attorney General at this point is trying to make some political hay with investigations of allegations of hacking of 9/11 victims' phone calls. But, you know, that's yet to be proven. I would adopt a wait-and-see attitude. I'm not convinced that this is going to spread in any meaningful way to the American side beyond what it already has. But yeah, of course, people are going to score political points off of it.
Alicia?
It's not just about political points. It's about the fact that they have committed crimes at an industrial scale. There's no telling the scope of how far this goes. The only thing I think we know for certain is that these are people who will do anything it takes to win. And so I don't think we have yet to see the full extent of what they've done. And I also think we need to watch and see how they handle and try to contain this crisis moving forward.
All right, but beside the criminal allegations, which will either come or not come, the political implication going into 2012, can this in effect hurt their standing in an election year in terms of the impact they would have in supporting certain candidates?
I think absolutely it could. I mean, we've already seen that their stock has taken quite a nosedive around some of these allegations. And I want to respond to something else because I think it's relevant to your question, and that is clearly there was a culture that was created where this kind of behavior was either permissible or people kind of look the other way. This is a global corporation. It is not much of a leap to say, well, just because it was only going on in the UK, that doesn't mean it necessarily wasn't happening here in the United States and other places. And I think certainly if we find out that there were either practices like this or others that are either, you know, unethical, which they do a lot of things that's unethical, but even more so than what we currently know, or illegal, absolutely it hurts Fox News and it hurts that empire's ability to kind of be the kingmaker that Roger Ailes wants to be.
All right, Alicia, I'm going to have to hold it there. Thank you, Alicia, Karen, and Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great panel. Ahead.